Thank you for joining us today on Fighting Words here over on the Body Locks YouTube channel. And joining me today is none other than new UFC flyweight and a successful UFC debutant, Amir Albazi. Amir, how are you today?
Thank you. I'm good, thanks. It's good to be back home.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, a lot of travel for you, and everything kind of happened in a bit of a whirlwind. I mean, you get the UFC call on short notice, but you were previously scheduled at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic to be competing in Brave CF. Can you walk through essentially what your time has been like from that cancellation of your Brave CF fight to the late notice UFC call and then the fight?
Yeah, so I had a fight lined up on Brave with, I think it was 14th of April, but didn't happen because of the corona. But I kept training, I kept staying fit, kept training with the guys along the shoot. And yeah, I got the call on Wednesday, asked me if I want to do a fight on Fight Island. Just took it, went there, took care of business, and came back.
Absolutely. Now, of course, with the coronavirus pandemic, it's forced a lot of individuals into difficult situations, especially for fighters. Gyms closed in many countries. Training was difficult. Being able to go out and go to a gym or out and to get a workout in was something that wasn't necessarily possible. Did you have any kind of issues as far as training during the pandemic, or was there anything that changed as far as your routine?
Yeah, of course. In the beginning, I wasn't used to it. I had to train a lot outside, but the more we got into it, I think the lockdown here was since March. So after a while, you got used to it, So I just did a workout whenever I could, was at least getting one workout a day.
Right. And of course, I would like to talk about that Brave CF fight because it was canceled due to the coronavirus. What were your emotions as you found out that a fight that you had been training for and anticipating, a big fight for you, was falling through due to something that was so far outside of your control?
Yeah, of course. But I still kind of other shows was getting canceled. So I kind of knew this might not happen because a lot of other shows just start canceling around. But then when the UFC Fight Island and what the UFC did, was amazing, gave a bit of hope back. So it was a little bit surreal getting the phone call and actually going down there.
Right. Of course, I would imagine that's a big phone call for you to get. A lot of fighters always want to compete in that UFC fight, and to compete on Fight Island is something that was one of the only possibilities for a fighter who was living outside of the United States. What did it mean to you that the UFC, one, reached out, and two, that they have a situation with Fight Island where fighters such as yourself who live outside of the United States could still compete for the UFC?
Yeah, it was just the perfect moment, When I got the call, that's why I had to jump on it. I said I wouldn't get a fight anywhere else, it's really hard during these times. So when they told me 10 days, I didn't really care if it was 1-2 days. I would still fly out.
Absolutely. Now, of course, during the pandemic, you mentioned that you had to get your workouts in when you could, but the fight was short notice. Did you feel like you had a quote unquote full training camp for this one? Obviously, you can in 10 days, but did you feel as though you were adequately prepared as far as getting in fight shape for the fight? Did you have any concerns there?
Yeah, the only thing was the weight, but regarding fighting, I trust in my skills. I believe I can go in there, and beat anyone. So in my skills, I was confident. But when it comes to the weight and other things around, everything was kind of new.
Right. And of course, you did mention that weight cut. Now, the fight was at bantamweight. You're normally a flyweight. What did your weight cut look like for this one?
It was a hard one, I had to cut a lot of weight in a very small window, But it was hard, but it felt a lot better, after the fight that I had to go through that. Would suck if I lost.
Right, I can certainly imagine that. Now, the fight was at bantamweight, even though you're a natural flyweight. Was that something that came about naturally? Did the UFC say, Are you able to make the weight? And 135 was the number that you were able to give, or was that something where the UFC came to you and they said, "Hey, we'd like you to take this fight, but it's okay if it's at bantamweight"?
No, they asked for a catch weight. My opponent asked for a catch weight in 61. So I just want to fight. I don't want to cut weight. So we just went in and had a fight.
Right, of course. And you mentioned at the top of the interview the London Shoot Fighters camp where you currently train. Now, once you got that 10 days notice for the UFC, what did that end of training camp look like for you guys? What kind of preparations were there, and who were you training with predominantly ahead of this big fight for you?
Yeah, it was amazing actually. That's why I love London Shoot. You know, all the atmosphere. I came to the gym. You know, everyone knew it. You know, like everyone started, you know, giving me just good energy. You know, and I just finished sparring with my training partner Farid Bashra, who came out with me there. We just finished our beating each other up, packed our stuff, and left.
Absolutely. Now, I remember in some of the interviews you were doing pre and post fight for your UFC fight, you talked about your concerns about maybe having some octagon jitters, some nerves, as someone fighting in the UFC for the first time. But in the post fight press conference, you said there were no nerves. You felt calm, cool, collected inside the cage. What was it like to be competing in the UFC and handling all the nerves and concerns about such a difficult time?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, to be honest. Like everyone get jitters before a fight, but before, like I always thought, if I'm gonna make my UFC debut, I'm gonna be, stressed. I was like imagining the jitters on that one, like be going in for the first time. I always wanted to be in the UFC and prove myself, against the best. So, but this time I was just calm, a lot of stuff happened with the short fight and last minute notice and everything. So when I came to the cage, I'm like, yes, finally where I belong. This is what I do. Here I can be calm and collected. So I didn't really feel really nervous. I felt at home.
Absolutely. Now, your opponent for this fight was Malcolm Gordon, who, like you, is also a flyweight, but competed at bantamweight for this fight. Did you know much about Gordon at the time when you were accepting the fight? And did you do any research on him as far as tape study or looking at his record to prepare for this fight?
No, not really. I have my coaches do that for me. They look at my opponent, but it wasn't really a game plan for this fight. It was more going in there, do my thing. I got to prove what I can do a bit standing up, on the ground as well. So that's exactly what I wanted to show.
Absolutely. And of course, you mentioned you were solid on the feet, good striking there, but really your bread and butter appears to be your grappling. Once you were able to get that takedown, you kind of flew effortlessly into the mount and then were able to get that triangle submission. Can you walk through that submission, being that it was the first triangle of the year in the UFC?
Yes. I'm happy to bring some real good jiu-jitsu back to the UFC, yeah, I just found the opening. I was, getting my ground and pound off. He tried to push me off, caught me a bit off guard, but I saw the opening. I knew what time. It wasn't a lot of time left, so I rested and went for the triangle, and I got it. When I get my legs around your neck, I know it's gonna be game over. So.
Right. And you did mention in the post-fight interview that you were aware that the triangle was not fully locked in, but you were confident enough in your ability to get that squeeze, to get the submission. Is that something specifically with the triangle that you worked on specifically either for this camp or in your camps more broadly?
I always done when I was competing in jiu-jitsu, even as a short guy, I was doing a lot of triangles. So I know triangles well, and everyone who knows jiu-jitsu on a high level knows that there is some tricks you can do to get on a squeeze a little bit tighter. I didn't have time to fix that triangle too much. I didn't want to open my legs, start fiddling with it again, and then the time would run out and I wouldn't even finish the triangle. So when I started squeezing on him, I heard him like he struggled to breathe, So I just put it in another gear and got the tap up. sometimes you have to do things the hard way, using a bit of extra strength.
Yeah, of course. And we mentioned at the top of this question that the triangle was the first that had happened in the UFC this year. Why do you feel that the triangle submission has kind of taken a back seat this year?
I want to show some real jiu-jitsu in the cage as well, like a finishing type of jiu-jitsu. And I don't know, maybe because people drill all the other fancy stuff, I don't know, but for me, I know what I can do on the ground, and I'm looking forward to my next fight.
Absolutely. And of course, you mentioned competing in high-level jiu-jitsu. Is competing in submission grappling something that you're open to continuing to do?
Yeah, definitely. I do that for fun. I was competing in that every weekend. I was somewhere competing. So yeah, I love it. I wouldn't mind it.
Absolutely. Now, I believe in one of your post-fight interviews, you were talking about the state of competitive jiu-jitsu right now, and you felt as though it was moving in the wrong direction. It was moving more towards points, advantages, stalling, and guard pulling. Do you feel as though hunting for the submission is taking a backseat to getting the win on points and advantages in competitive jiu-jitsu right now?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think it's how the rules are made up makes fighters can get away with playing the rules and just playing on points, I think Fila had a great system, Fila wrestling had a great system for grappling that they made them more aggressive a bit with takedown submissions, but with all these new competitions coming up, submission only, so it's still going in the right direction, but it just needs more of a push on, submissions and not only playing by the rules.
Right, of course. And specifically talking about competitive jiu-jitsu, now that you're in the UFC, you have access to a lot of these promotions that are on UFC Fight Pass, the Submission Underground, the Eddie Bravo Invitational, Polaris, all these promotions, Quintet as well. Are there any specific promotions or rule sets that you feel produce the best jiu-jitsu?
No, not really. They're all good in their own way, but if UFC is cool with it, I'm ready to go in Polaris or wherever they want me to go,
Right, of course. And now moving a little bit more back to the MMA side of things, now you're in the UFC, you've got that first win under your belt. Are you planning on staying at 135 pounds at bantamweight, or would you like to move back to flyweight for your next fight?
No, it's definitely going to be in flyweight. I'm already back in training, getting ready, trying to get a full camp for the next one. So, but you never know, it might be something last minute. But no, you're definitely going to see me in flyweight.
Is there anyone in that flyweight division who stands out to you? I know there have been a lot of flyweight fights taking place on Fight Island and during the COVID-19 fight era. Are there any fighters who stand out as a potential next opponent for you?
No, nothing at the moment. There was some good fights in the weekend. They all did great. For me, I'm just happy that the UFC is having their eyes on the flyweight division a little bit more, because we almost lost that division a couple of years ago. So I'm just happy being there and hopefully make it more exciting.
Absolutely. And speaking of that flyweight division and speaking of exciting, I'd like to get your thoughts on the title fight that recently happened between Davison Figueiredo and Joseph Benavidez. Now, it was a rematch. In the first fight, it was a Figueiredo knockout, but he had missed weight, so he wasn't able to win the belt. And now in the rematch, the fight kind of went the same way. It ended in submission this time with several knockdowns, and now Figueiredo is the champion. What do you think as a flyweight now in the UFC about the champion and about what the division will look like under him?
Yeah, I think it was a great fight. He did great against Benavidez. Everything went as planned for him, and he got the choke. So, but for me, it's my first fight. I need to get at least a couple of fights under my belt. We're gonna see. It's gonna be interesting.
Certainly, and I'm sure as you continue to climb up the ranks, that's a fight that will get closer and closer, ideally. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about your background in the sport because you do have a very compelling story. So when did you first get involved in mixed martial arts, and how did your family's movement across the continent kind of shape the way that you were able to get involved in the sport?
Yeah, when I was young, I was getting in bit of trouble and fighting, and I couldn't really speak the language. So it's cool if someone said something and I couldn't really answer back in Swedish, no one would understand. So I had to use these two to protect myself. So after a while, I saw UFC, and started training and just got hooked on it and used it for something good. And here we are today.
Right. So it does look like the culmination of all of those efforts. Now, when did you get involved with London Shoot Fighters specifically?
I think it was in 2012. I moved to London from Sweden and I started training at London Shoot Fighters and doing MMA full time. So,
right, of course. And you mentioned moving from Sweden to the UK. I believe on the broadcast they talked about that your family, your parents had moved to the UK prior and you had stayed back in Sweden. Is that accurate?
yeah, so when I was 15 back home in Sweden, my family moved to London. So at that age, I didn't really want to move. I'm thinking, not again. So I just said no. I said, I'm not moving. You guys can do whatever you want. I'm not moving from here. I just started getting into Jiu-Jitsu and MMA, start training and start competing. So I didn't want to leave it and change my lifestyle completely, So I stayed for, I think, from 15 until I was 19. And then I moved back to London, to be close to my family as well and start training at London Shoot.
Right. Absolutely. And right. Happy for that as well. Yes, of course. And of course, from Sweden, that was not where you were born originally. You were born in Iraq. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was born in Iraq and moved from Iraq at the age of 7. We just woke up one morning, packed and left. So I know how to deal with last minute fights. So yeah, we moved from there to Syria and stayed there for a year and a half before then moving to Sweden. And it was hard coming to a new country and stuff. So that's why I had to get into a couple of fights before using it to something good.
Absolutely. And can I just say that is a very apt description of your ability to pack up and leave. So it makes that 10-day notice UFC fight seem a lot less crazy when you're packing up and leaving an entire country at such a young age.
Yeah, I packed my bag. I bags a lot of stuff. I know how to pack them quick, right?
Absolutely. Amir, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And before we end the call, the floor is yours. If there's anyone that you'd like to say thank you or give a shout out, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I want to thank London Shoot Fighters, the coaches, Paul and Alexis, my teammates, Farid and Javed Bashra, and everyone else at the gym. I want to thank Paradigm for hooking me up with this fight, with this last minute fight. So, and thanks the UFC. So I'm coming back.
Absolutely. Amir, thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your day.